The supposed leader of the strongest country in the history of mankind, Joe Biden, finally gave his big Afghanistan presser yesterday, arriving a mere 5 hours late to the event, likely because some days drugs take longer to kick in than others now, don't they? The Drooler-in-Chief took to the stage. His eyes were bloodshot and glazed over, with his pace of speaking obviously labored as he began to robotically read the teleprompter. What then transpired was one of the most insulting, tone-deaf spectacles I've ever seen from a president. Instead of getting right into the crisis in Afghanistan, Biden inexcusably began the presser by plugging his, quote, Build Back Better agenda. No, I'm not kidding. I shit you not, it was absolutely surreal. We'll watch the clip right after this quick commercial break to pay some bills. And shout out to all those folks buying the Patriot Supply meals and PayPal donations. I'm truly humbled by your support as we lick our wounds over Google's disgusting, career-killing, un-American behavior. Friends, I'm going to point out the obvious. It seems like big government and big tech are trying to destroy America. Everything they touch turns into a disaster. Pretty soon the whole system will fall apart, and the first thing to fall will be the food supply chain. So, do you have enough emergency food to get through a serious long-term crisis where you can't get food at the grocery store? Most people don't, and they'll panic when the time comes. That is why the smart move now is to get long-term storage emergency food before things go bad. I highly recommend My Patriot Supply. They've served millions of American families and have over 41,000 4-star and 5-star reviews. Their mission is your survival, and right now you can save 25% on a 4-week kit of emergency food that will save the day, probably soon. Order a starter kit for each member of your family, and they'll ship everything quickly and discreetly to your door. Go to preparewithresurgence.com so you can claim your 4-week emergency food kit and save 25% in the process. That's preparewithresurgence.com, or hit that link in the description box.
Before I update you on the meeting that I had with leaders of the G7 earlier today, I want to say a word about the progress we're making on the Build Back Better agenda here at home. I just got off the telephone with the leaders in the House. Today, the House of Representatives has taken a significant step toward making a historic investment that's going to transform America, cut taxes for working families, and position the American economy for long-term growth. When I became president, it was clear that we had to confront an immediate economic crisis, the most significant recession we've had since the Depression, or at least since Johnson. But that wasn't going to be enough. We also had to make some long-term investments in Americans and America itself. The first thing we did was to write and pass the American Rescue Plan, and it's working. Our economy has added 4 million jobs in my first 6 months in office. Economic growth is up to the fastest it's been, the fastest rate in 40 years, and unemployment is coming down. Right now, our economic growth is leading the world's advanced economies. But to win the future, we need to take the next step.
Okay, so Biden would go on to spend minutes talking about the climate crisis and bragging about Democrats passing a voter rights bill that will die in the Senate. Now, before he even mentioned the disaster unfolding in Afghanistan, he praised Nancy Pelosi for her work on the budget bill and claimed that he had produced 4 million jobs. It was disgustingly disconnected from any sort of reality. Later, much later, Biden would finally move to the issue of the day. At that point, he lied about yesterday's call with the G7 leaders, claiming they were supportive and standing shoulder to shoulder with him on his withdrawal from Afghanistan. You see, that's contrary to the public reports that the Brits and Germans are furious at what is going on and are begging us to extend the timeline because they can't get everyone out in time. The gaslighting followed a pattern of Biden doing the same over the last several weeks. He continues to act as if everything is going well, reciting his talking points, of course. In fact, it's fairly obvious that much of yesterday's speech was lifted from the speech he gave a week ago. The idiot, of course, blamed Trump. Then he talked about killing Osama bin Laden again, and he insisted that our allies were absolutely fine with everything occurring. It was like Groundhog Day. But by far the biggest takeaway for me from this press conference is that Biden is sick, As I said, his eyes were bloodshot and glazed over. It was difficult to even see the whites of his eyes at times. His presentation was obviously defensive and cold, with no empathy to be found. Upon finishing his teleprompter reading, he simply stumbled out, taking no questions, clearly unable to physically or mentally do so. I don't know about you, but to me it was obvious as hell why he was 5 hours late to this presser. Something is bad. Something is seriously wrong with this clown, and there's no way it can be ignored anymore. Right now, we have an emergency in Afghanistan playing out, and that's first and foremost. Thousands of Americans are trapped, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda are on the rise again. But long term, the fact that we do not actually have a president will become the most pressing matter. Basically, the United States right now is a rudderless ship drifting along as our stature in the world collapses. Americans, including the media, better start paying attention because our enemies damn sure are. Now, I almost hate to discuss political ramifications in the midst of Joe Biden's costly, deadly screw-up in Afghanistan for two reasons. One, because the stakes are so damn high, but that's part of what we do here, and the last thing this president deserves is a pass. Now, on that note, the American people do not seem to be giving him one, thank God. The second reason, ironically, in at least some part led to these kinds of idiotic decisions being made. In a country where information is so manipulated, do any of these polls matter anymore? Probably not. Our lovely media, including most of these polling firms, are so mind-numbingly devoted to the party that polls are almost worthless at this point. Kind of like, well, your vote in a California election. Nonetheless, I'm going to report on it anyways. The latest USA Today Suffolk poll shows Biden disapproval at an abysmal 41%, with 55% disapproving. The numbers on his handling of Afghanistan are, of course, even worse. Now, by my count, this is the fifth straight poll that shows Biden under 50% in approval, but this one is far worse than the other ones. Rasmussen, for example, has him at 46% approval. 41% approval is reaching the depths of who should be President Donald Trump and former President George W. Bush reached in their lowest moments. Now, folks, this is not the kind of damage that is just repaired overnight either. In fact, it's the kind of damage that is rarely repaired at all. Now, I know it's taboo to be confident about anything to do with politics these days, but we are quickly getting to a point where it's not a matter of if Republicans retake Congress next year, but by how large of a margin. Translation: it certainly seems that this ass clown and his administration are handing us back everything they stole. The last bastion of Biden's presidency, believe it or not, was his supposed competence. That illusion has been destroyed by the latest debacle, and repeated attempts to shift back to COVID aren't really working anymore. In fact, COVID is becoming a negative issue for the Drooler-in-Chief as well, given we are now seeing supposed spikes that can only be placed solely at his feet and not his predecessors. Remember, folks, COVID was supposed to be over on July 4th. How's that going? So telling people to give up their rights and stumping for vaccine mandates is only going to hurt stumbling, bumbling Joe further. Imagine that. Now, past that, the situation in Afghanistan, as bad as it is now, has not even begun to reach its peak. We are about to leave thousands of Americans behind. That's the reality of the situation on the ground. And when that happens, the Taliban are going to use them as hostages. If you thought Jimmy Carter's Iran hostage crisis was bad, folks, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, lastly, and I hate to laugh, but I can't help myself, this is cartoonish. I haven't even gotten into the economic issues yet, including the out-of-control inflation. This is, by far, the worst first 8 months for a president I've ever seen or heard of or read about. Now, for his part, Biden isn't doing anything but doubling down on terrible policy decisions, or, as we would say in the Midwest, doubling down on stupid. Now, folks, one crucial ingredient that we cannot forget to mix into the midterm stew here is the tremendous amount of backlash to wokeness that I expect to occur, and the 2020 Democrat bloodbath looms large. Get ready. Get your popcorn out. As always, I want to thank you for watching, and I do again apologize for the lack of fresh content lately. I'm hoping to increase over the next couple of weeks. If you liked it, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.